Every time you remember something, you change it. Your brain doesn't replay memories, it rebuilds them from scratch, and each reconstruction leaves fingerprints. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the version of your past you're carrying around right now might be a story you've been rewriting without permission. The question isn't whether your memories are real, it's whether the person remembering them still is. Here's what's at stake. You trust your memory to tell you who you are. Your first kiss, your worst fight, the moment you decided to quit that job. These aren't just facts, they're the foundation of your identity. But decades of cognitive psychology and neuroscience research suggest something uncomfortable. Memory doesn't work like a hard drive. It works like a game of telephone inside your own head. This matters right now because you're making decisions about relationships, career moves, unresolved conflicts based on events you think you remember accurately. You're defending positions, holding grudges, repeating patterns, all anchored to a past that your brain has been quietly editing every time you think about it. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly how memory reconstruction works, why recalling a memory can corrupt it, and how emotion and suggestion rewrite your past without you noticing. More importantly, you'll walk away with one simple practice that builds awareness without paranoia. Because the goal isn't to distrust everything, it's to see clearly. Think about your most vivid memory. Maybe it's a childhood birthday or a breakup conversation. When you recall it, it feels like pressing play on a video file. The details are there, the colors, the sounds, even the way the light hit someone's face. That feeling of clarity is so convincing that you'd bet money on what happened. Here's the problem. Your brain isn't storing that scene as a single file. It's storing fragments, visual details in one area, emotions in another, context somewhere else, and every time you remember, your brain reassembles those fragments into a coherent story. The technical term is memory reconstruction, and it's not a bug, it's how the system evolved to work. Why would evolution design memory this way? Because storage is expensive. Your brain can't afford to keep perfect copies of every moment. Instead, it keeps the gist, the emotional tone, and a few anchor details. When you need to remember, it fills in the gaps using schemas, mental templates based on what usually happens in situations like this. This is why 10 people can witness the same car accident and give 10 different descriptions. They're not lying, they're each reconstructing the event using slightly different fragments and slightly different schemas. The confidence they feel is real, the accuracy is not. Quick question. Without looking, which way is Abraham Lincoln facing on a US penny? Left or right? Most people guess wrong. You've seen pennies thousands of times, but your brain never prioritized that detail. It stored small copper coin, Lincoln's head, and called it done. That's reconstruction in miniature. Your memory of a penny is a sketch, not a photograph. Now imagine this same principle applied to conversations, confrontations, promises. Your brain is doing the same thing, storing the gist, discarding the rest, filling in blanks with what makes sense. The version you remember isn't wrong exactly, it's just one possible edit of the original footage. Here's where it gets stranger. Every time you recall a memory, your brain doesn't just play it back, it temporarily destabilizes the neural connections that hold it together, updates them with new information from your current context, and resaves the modified version. This process is called reconsolidation. Think of it like opening an old document on your computer. The moment you open it, it becomes vulnerable to edits. Maybe you meant to just read it, but you accidentally change a word, adjust the formatting, or merge it with something else you've been working on. When you save and close, that's the new version. The original is gone. Your brain does this automatically. You don't choose to update the memory. It happens as a side effect of retrieval. If you're in a good mood when you remember a neutral event, that event gets tagged with positive emotion. If someone plants a suggestion right before you recall something, that suggestion can weave itself into the memory. You won't notice. It'll just feel like what you've always remembered. This is why therapy works, by the way. Recalling a traumatic memory in a safe, controlled environment allows the brain to reconsolidate it with new context, safety, support, reinterpretation. It's also why interrogation can create false confessions. Repeated questioning combined with suggestion can reconsolidate an innocent person's memory until they genuinely believe they committed a crime they didn't. Here's the uncomfortable part. Confidence and accuracy are almost unrelated when it comes to memory. Studies show that people who are 100% certain about a detail are wrong nearly as often as people who are only 50% certain. The brain generates the feeling of confidence based on how smoothly the reconstruction happens, not on whether the reconstruction is accurate. This means you can't use your own sense of certainty as a reliability check. That vivid, crystalline memory you'd swear on, it might be real. It might be a reconstruction you've rehearsed so many times that it feels real. There's no internal way to tell the difference. 3 forces shape what you remember and how you remember it: emotion, attention, and suggestion. Let's break them down. Emotion acts like a highlighter. High emotion events get priority storage, but the brain makes a trade-off. It locks in the emotional gist and a few central details, but it becomes terrible at peripheral details. This is why someone who survives a robbery might remember the gun vividly, but can't describe the robber's face. The emotion focused their attention so narrowly that everything outside that spotlight got lost. Attention determines what gets encoded in the first place. If you're distracted, multitasking, or emotionally overwhelmed, your brain doesn't build strong memory traces. Later, when you try to recall the event, your brain fills in the gaps with plausible guesses. You won't feel like you're guessing, it'll feel like remembering, but you're essentially making up details that fit the story. Suggestion is the sneakiest. If someone asks, "Was the car red or blue?" they're planting a color schema even if the car was green. When you reconstruct the memory later, red or blue feels familiar because it was part of the retrieval context. Over time, that suggested detail can replace the original. This is the misinformation effect, and it's incredibly powerful. Leading questions can sometimes alter later recall, especially when misinformation is introduced after the event. You've probably heard of the Mandela Effect, collective false memories, like people swearing the Monopoly Man has a monocle, he doesn't, or that Curious George has a tail, he doesn't. These aren't proof of alternate universes, they're proof that memory runs on schemas. Your brain expects rich characters to have accessories and monkeys to have tails, so it fills in those details when reconstructing. Thousands of people make the same error because they're using the same mental templates. This happens in your personal life too. You remember a conversation going one way because that's how conversations like that usually go. Your partner remembers it differently because they're using a different schema. You're both wrong and both right. You're just working from different reconstructions. So here's the truth bomb. If your memories are constantly being rewritten and you can't trust your own confidence, what part of you is stable? This is the existential cost of memory's unreliability. Your identity is built on a narrative continuity, the story you tell yourself about who you were, who you are, and why you do what you do. But if the raw material of that story is being edited every time you access it, then identity itself is a moving target. The person you were 5 years ago isn't just gone because time passed. They're gone because you've been revising them in retrospect. The hidden cost of not addressing this: you make decisions based on a past that may never have existed in the form you remember. You carry resentments from events that have been distorted by suggestion and emotion. You avoid risks because you remember failures more vividly than they actually happened. You trust your certainty and ignore contradictory evidence because the feeling of knowing is so strong. But here's the reframe. This isn't nihilism, it's liberation. If your memories are reconstructed, that means they're flexible. You're not condemned to carry the past exactly as it was, or as you think it was. You can choose which details to revisit, which contexts to pair with old memories, and which reconstructions to reinforce. The question isn't whether your memories are real, it's whether they're useful. Let me pull this together with clarity. Memory reconstruction happens because your brain encodes experiences in distributed fragments. When you recall something, your hippocampus coordinates with different cortical regions to retrieve those fragments. It feels like playback because your brain simulates the original experience using the same neural networks. Your brain does this as an adaptive response. It's efficient, it saves energy, allows you to update knowledge, and lets you integrate new information with old experiences. Subjectively, it feels seamless and accurate. The reality is, you're constantly building plausible narratives from incomplete data. This is also why two people can remember the same event completely differently. They attended to different details, felt different emotions, and are now using different schemas to reconstruct. Neither is lying. Both are using imperfect tools. If this is true, what do you do with important memories? How do you preserve accuracy without becoming paranoid? The answer is meta-awareness. You don't need perfect memory. You need to know when memory is most likely to fail and where you should double-check your assumptions. Emotional intensity, time gaps, and repeated retellings are red flags. If a memory feels extremely vivid and you've told the story many times, that's when you should be most skeptical, not most certain. Here's the single habit that changes everything. Start a reality check journal and do it for 14 days. Anytime something emotionally intense happens, an argument, a big decision, a surprising interaction, pause right after it ends and give yourself just 60 seconds to capture it on paper. First, write only the observable facts of what happened, as if a camera were describing the scene. Who said what you did next, what physically changed, even the time if you remember it. Verbs and nouns, no interpretation. Then write what you assumed it meant in the moment, the story your mind immediately started telling, the motives you attributed, the conclusions you jumped to. And finally, write what you felt. Name the emotion plainly without defending it. Then come back 48 hours later and add one more entry. What changed? Did the emotions cool down or intensify? Did your interpretation shift? Do you remember the same details or do new ones suddenly feel obvious? Write the delta, because that contrast is the point, and it's where you start catching the difference between what happened, what you inferred, and what your memory quietly edits over time. Expected micro outcome. After 2 weeks, you'll have 14 examples of how your perception and memory evolve in real time. You'll start noticing when you're adding interpretation to facts. You'll catch yourself feeling certain about things that were ambiguous 2 days ago. Most importantly, you'll build metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. One potential pitfall, you might spiral into overthinking every interaction. Don't. The goal isn't to distrust everything. It's to recognize where you're on solid ground and where you're filling in gaps. If you're using the journal to second-guess yourself obsessively, you're misusing the tool. Use it to clarify, not to catastrophize. Imagine you have a tense conversation with your boss. Immediately after, you jot down, "Boss said project deadline is too tight. I said we need 2 more weeks. He frowned and said, we'll see." I assumed he was dismissing my request. I felt anxious. 48 hours later, you revisit. Maybe you realize he didn't actually dismiss you. He said, "We'll see," which is neutral. The frown might have been about something else. The anxiety made you reconstruct the conversation as more hostile than it was. That awareness shifts how you approach the follow-up meeting. This is the power of the practice. You're not trying to find objective truth. You're learning to see where memory and interpretation diverge, and that space is where better decisions live. Let me close the loop from the beginning. I said every time you remember something, you change it. Now you know why. Reconstruction is how memory works. Reconsolidation is how retrieval modifies storage. Emotion, attention, and suggestion are the forces that shape what gets encoded and how it gets retrieved. Confidence is not accuracy. It's just the feeling of a smooth reconstruction. The open loop was this: if your memories keep changing, what part of you is stable? Here's the answer. Stability doesn't come from having a fixed past. It comes from having a coherent process for navigating uncertainty. You are not the sum of your memories. You are the person who decides what to do with them. The version of your past that you carry is always going to be a reconstruction. The question is whether you're doing it consciously or by default. The Reality Check Journal gives you a way to participate in that process, to see when you're on solid ground and when you're filling in blanks. That's not paranoia, that's clarity. Before you go, tell me this. What's one memory you're 100% certain about, but now you're wondering if you've reconstructed it over time? Drop it in the comments, just one sentence. I want to see what stands out. If this changed how you think about your own mind, this channel is about that exactly, taking ideas from philosophy, neuroscience, and psychology and turning them into tools you can actually use. Subscribe if you want more explorations like this. I'll see you in the next one.